breaking news from Gaza on August 2nd, 2 a.m. Palestine time. The government media office in Gaza held a press conference, and the translation reads, 300 days of the ongoing genocidal war waged by the Israeli occupation army on our Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, with full support from the American administration and the global forces of injustice. During this horrific war, the occupation has committed 3,457 massacres, resulting in 49,480 martyrs and missing persons. And remember, that's an extreme undercount. The scientific journal The Lancet reported at the beginning of July a modest estimate is about 186,000 people have been killed in Gaza since October. I highly recommend searching and reading that report if you haven't yet. That's seen as a modest estimate because of the conditions in Gaza compared to similar conflicts. And we know that the government media office, there's all this propaganda that they overcount the numbers, right? That's what the US that doesn't want to admit it says. That's what Israeli propaganda says. But in reality, it's an extreme undercount because they only count what they can document. And a lot of this is not documented because people are completely wiped out in these massacres, no survivors. There's chemical warfare and weapons that the civil defense forces have said are incinerating the bodies. There's no traces left. A lot of people have been abducted and people don't know it yet. So it's an extreme undercount. Carrying on, including 10,000 missing under the rubble of destroyed buildings, of which 39,480 martyrs have reached hospitals. So that's what they're saying. These are only people who have reached the hospitals, whether they died there or were transported thereafter. The health system collapsed in November or December of last year, and the death count at that point was around 30,000 or something, I think. It hasn't been going up since then, even though the massacres people in Gaza have been saying have been getting more violent every night. Among them are 16,314 child martyrs, 10,980 women martyrs, with children and women comprising 69% of the victims. The humanitarian situation is catastrophic in every sense of the word and deepening unprecedentedly, with the policies of closing crossings and preventing the entry of aid, medicines, goods, and supplies, exacerbating the food crisis and reinforcing starvation and malnutrition, especially among thousands of children who are deprived of milk, nutritional supplements, and vaccinations. Additionally, 2 million displaced people live in extremely harsh conditions with no means of livelihood or a dignified life. Among the displaced, there are outbreaks of numerous diseases, the most severe being polio, viral hepatitis, and various skin, respiratory, and digestive diseases, leading to a 6-fold increase in natural death rates compared to pre-genocide war levels. And remember, the death rates in Gaza were higher pre-genocide than in other parts of the world. More than 9,000 natural deaths occurred in the Gaza Strip during the genocidal war, 6 times higher than the natural death rate before the war. The rise in death rates is due to the deteriorating humanitarian situation caused by the genocide and disease outbreaks, with more than 1,800,000 cases of different diseases reported due to the war, conditions, and displacement. Other contributing factors include the severe overcrowding of patients in hospitals, with 34 hospitals rendered non-functional, the absence of medical services due to the occupation, the lack of medicines and treatments blocked by the occupation, and the lethal conditions of displacement and harsh living conditions in tents and lifeless areas where our people are forced by the occupation to move only to die from disease or bombardment. During the genocidal war, the occupation executed its declared plan by targeting hundreds of societal groups, killing 885 medical personnel, 79 civil defense members, and assassinating 165 journalists and media workers. Additionally, the occupation executed over 100 scientists, university professors, and distinguished researchers in Gaza, eliminating distinguished societal groups in a criminal and brutal way. We remind the world that during the genocidal war, the Israeli occupation destroyed hospitals, burned them, and rendered them non-functional. It also established 7 mass graves inside hospitals, specifically at El-Shifa Medical Complex, Nasser Medical Complex, and Kamal Adwan Hospital. The occupation's crime of closing the crossings, including the Rafah crossing that they took over a few months ago, still hasn't opened yet because the US has not put pressure on them, any real pressure to open the crossings again. Just like every other massacre and crime against humanity enacted on the Palestinian people by the Zionist entity, it becomes normalized, and then it's just the reality. That's how the 17-year blockade and siege on Gaza started. It started as this temporary thing. That's what they called it in the media because that's what the occupation called it. So the media ran with it. It was deemed illegal from the moment it started, and it continued for 17 fucking years, and the Rafah crossing has been closed for about 2 months now, and it's still closed, and there isn't pressure on it. People can't evacuate. People that have to pay bribes to go through Egypt to evacuate, right? 10K bribes a person. They can't even bribe their way out anymore, which they shouldn't have to do in the first place, but that option's gone now. Aid isn't getting in. Before it was getting blocked at the north, and now it's getting blocked at the Rafah crossing too. Before it was getting blocked partially but now no one can go through. The occupation still have their tanks in there. A couple days ago, there was video of them. I shared it on my Telegram channel. The URL's on my profile of them literally tearing down the entrance gate of the Rafah crossing. They've already done that before, but they're just completely wiping it out. The occupation's crime of closing the crossings has caused a real humanitarian disaster by preventing more than 25,000 injured and sick people from traveling for treatment, while simultaneously targeting the entire healthcare sector. In the midst of this dire situation and genocidal war, the occupation has officially decided to establish Sde Timan prison, where more than 35 prisoners were executed under severe, lethal torture, among more than 5,000 prisoners abducted during the genocidal war, without monitoring by international organizations tasked with overseeing prison violations. I just reported today 2 Palestinians who were detained in Sde Timan prison have been announced to be martyrs. Both died under torture. Generations will never forget these crimes throughout history, and the end of these historical crimes will be the liberation and salvation from the Israeli-American occupation, similar to what happened in Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, and other countries that fought until they expelled the occupiers and their collaborators, achieving freedom for their land, principles, and sanctities. Glory and eternity to our righteous martyrs, quick recovery to our heroic wounded, immediate freedom to our brave prisoners. All salute to our great Palestinian people.